Chapter 555. Nightmare 3. Bonus images. It wasn't as if Eugene didn't feel any emotion in the series of dreams. Yet these emotions were his own. Even if he was in the midst of a dream dominated by Noir, Eugene's emotions remained beyond her control. Likewise, Eugene's existence, even within the dream, was not governed by Noir. Everything else merely formed the backdrop and circumstance. The agency over Eugene's being rested solely with him. However, the dream itself is beyond my interference, Eugene concluded. He had tried interfering several times, but it proved impossible. Even though he was aware that he was dreaming, the control of the dream itself lay firmly in Noir's grasp. Her dominion over it was incomparably strong. To overcome the current situation, Eugene knew he had to start with something simple and straightforward. Though he was uncertain if it was the right solution, the best course of action Eugene could think of was to shatter the dream itself. Rumbly. With a roar, flames enveloped the glass blade, and it began to tremble violently. Eugene glared at the sky while clenching the hilt of the sword. The night sky began to quake. Noir flashed a provocative smile while turning her back to the distorted moon. For now, I have a few things I want to ask you. I'm genuinely curious about them, Noir said. She had not changed her attire from the grand mansion. She wore an elaborate dress utterly unsuitable for combat. The skirt reached down to her ankles and it was adorned with lavish ruffles. Her arms were covered with long white gloves reaching up to her forearms, and in her left hand she held a folded fan. "Hamel," she called out, then slowly raised the fan in front of her face. "Do you really think you can defeat me?" With a swish, the fan unfolded. The fan, as ornate as her dress, covered Noir's lips, though her eyes remained uncovered. Her eyes curved into a slight smile, gleaming from the shadows cast by the moon. "Do you really think you can defeat me in this dream?" she repeated. It was a question not worth answering. Eugene shifted Levantine to his side. The blade pointed at the sky and the flickering flames seemed to lick at the moon. Crack crackle. The flames of the white flame formula resonated with Levantine. "Can I win?" Though it was a question not worth answering, Eugene responded, "I don't know." It was an honest answer. He continued, "I'm not here to lose and die to you. Nor am I here to indulge in your deranged obsession. I am here." The spreading flames intensified the tremor of the dream. The resonance between Levantine and the flames of the white flame formula was definitely impacting the dream. Whoosh. The fluttering sparks gathered behind Eugene and formed wings of fire. In the darkness of the dream's night, the black flames of prominence stood out a distinct shade. "I'm here to kill you," Eugene declared. There was no hesitation in his statement. There shouldn't have been. Noir felt a chilling thrill. She wrapped one hand around her trembling shoulder while smiling with concealed lips behind the fan. "Yes, I know," she answered. Hamel's resolve was palpable in his every expression, response, and emotion. She could see a mix of calm determination and desperate tenacity. Yet it was laden with overwhelming emotions that were buried deep within. Noir perceived a resemblance between the current Hamel and Levantine. The blade of transparent, exquisite glass appeared so fragile that a mere tap might shatter it, yet paradoxically it never would. Within that seemingly fragile glass blade was an inferno capable of consuming the world and more. "I know the extent of your resolve in coming here," Noir said. Crack. The distorted full moon began to fracture. "Hamel, you say you came to kill me, but there's more to it than that. You came prepared to die by my hands," she continued. The cracks in the full moon widened, with fragments and debris scattering behind Noir. "This is the dream that I create and rule. I admit, Hamel. In this dream I cannot control your presence or your emotions. But I can see your feelings and memories. My Hamel, you've left a will," Noir called out. The disintegration of the full moon accelerated. Behind Noir there was no longer a full moon but a circle of moon shards. "However, I'm not fond of the contents of that will. You already know, don't you? Can Moulin Roar truly replace you as the master of Levantine after you die? You are the only one that the Demon King of Incarceration considers special. You're the only one who gets the chance. Without you he wouldn't bother," said Noir. As the moon shards spread wider, the stars resonated with them. Every star in the sky seemed to gather around Noir, escaping the undulating darkness of the night. Indeed, who could stand against the demon king of destruction in your place? Gilead Lionheart? Guion Lionheart? Carmen Lionheart? You really believe those young, feeble twins can face the demon king of destruction? Noir mocked. I don't know, Eugene muttered. But they will manage somehow. I don't believe that those living in this era are so insignificant that my death would be in vain. That's why I wrote the will. When I die, Molin, Sienna, and Anise, they will kill the demon king of incarceration in my stead. If anyone is worthy to stand against the demon king of destruction, it's those of the Lionheart blood. Thud. Eugene's feet lightly pushed against the ground and he soared into the sky. Fortunately, the Lionhearts are a large family. There's no shortage of members who meet the necessary qualifications, he said. Ahaha. Noir laughed, her shoulders shaking in tandem. Hamel, you know as well as I do how unlikely that is. Of course I know, he said. But he had to leave such a will. So, I plan to survive somehow, he stated. It won't be easy, she retorted. No, it's simple and straightforward. I just have to kill you, Noir Giabella, before I die, said Eugene. It was reckless, even improbable, and thus he was desperate. Prominence blazed even brighter. The lone wing of that flame alone enshrouded Eugene in a sanctuary. His sanctuary stood tall even in the dream Noir had conjured. Sanctuary and dream collided. Yet to Noir this was but a trivial rebellion. She snorted dismissively while shaking her head. No. Her left hand, which was draped over her shoulder, moved. Fingers wrapped in white gloves traced a circle in the air while pointing skyward. Hamel, the task you propose is neither simple nor easy. Kill me? She questioned. The night began to howl and the full collapse began. Shattered shards of the moon and stars tore through the night's darkness while plummeting to the ground. It's a tremendously difficult and arduous task, Noir stated. The moon and stars in the endlessly vast distant night sky were small enough to be covered with a palm or picked with fingers. However, that was no longer the case as they descended and grew closer. Sienna had talked about the romance of using meteor. The grand spell of overwhelming mass was currently falling towards Eugene. This wasn't reality. It couldn't possibly be reality. If countless stars and shattered shards of the moon were to fall in reality, the world would be utterly destroyed. That was why such absurd violence was possible. Everything was merely a moment of a nightmare. Even amid an onslaught of stars and moons capable of obliterating the world, Noir's dream did not end. But Eugene would die. His divinity and intuition warned him. Romance, is it? Eugene scoffed. Levels of violence otherwise impossible in reality were made possible because they were in a dream. But Noir wasn't the only one who was allowed such an option. Although others might have been helpless in such a dream, Eugene could put up resistance. That was why he had unfolded his prominence. He had not extended but tightly wound his sanctuary around him for defense and enhancement. His sanctuary mingled with Noir's dream, realizing the dream Eugene desired. Ting. The blade of Levantian trembled. Eugene held his breath and raised his left hand. The divine fire transferred from the blade and wrapped around his hand. If this were reality, he would never use ignition now. This was not the decisive phase of the battle, and once he used it, his divine power would be sealed. But now such concerns were unnecessary. My goodness, Noir gasped. To think he'd used the dream in reverse. Noir was genuinely astonished. Meanwhile, the moon and stars continued to fall towards Eugene. The catastrophic violence filled the night sky. It appeared as if the sky would completely collapse and merge with the ground. It was an unrealistic spectacle. But Eugene did not end with ignition. Eugene's sanctuary, which had melted into the dream, continued to realize Eugene's desires. Another Levantian appeared. Wait. For the first time, a look of confusion crossed Noir's face. Hamel. Another Levantian appeared. Even though this is a dream. Another Levantian appeared. I can do as I please in this dream because I possess the demon eye of fantasy. Moreover, I also have the demon eye of divine glory. Another Levantian appeared. I am the ruler of this dream. Whatever happens, I can handle it. But you cannot. Another Levantian appeared. Just like how you are soaked in cold sweat and feel your heart palpitating when you wake from a nightmare. Just like how you scream in your awakening when you fall in your dream. Another Levantian appeared. Don't you understand? What happens here in this dream affects you in reality too. Ignition is fine. You're used to that. But this is different. This is something you can't handle in reality. Another Levantian appeared. No, Eugene countered. I can handle it. If my brain burns out from the overload, my saint will manage it somehow. If my mind gets trapped in the dream, Sienna will find a way. Levantian continued to multiply. And if you say I can't handle it in reality, what does that even mean to me now? If I die in this dream, what good is reality? Eugene questioned. Flames emanating from dozens of Levantian filled the space between the sky and the ground. Your mind won't endure it, Noor shook her head. I will endure, Eugene responded, shaking his head in return. His mind had withstood the center of the Demon King of Destruction. There was still work to be done. He hoped the ugly, improbable story written in his will wouldn't reach others. Eugene swallowed and gripped the real Levantian. Dozens of Levantians flared up identically. Flames rose to defy the catastrophic disaster that threatened to obliterate the world. Sound itself was extinguished. Countless stars turned to ash in the Levantian's blaze. All fragments of the falling moon burned up. The sky of the dream was no longer night. The flames of Levantian had extinguished even the darkness of the night. The night melted into flames, turning the world into a twilight hue. Noor still covered her mouth with her fan. She was undisturbed by the immense destruction. She remained unscathed. But this twilight hue caused a slight stir in Noir. Impressive, she complimented. Noir smiled and nodded her head. Hamel's absurd act of interfering with the dream had definitely flustered her. Who could have imagined turning such an overwhelmingly disadvantageous battlefield to his advantage? But it's not enough, she said. The inferno that had erased both earth and sky targeted Noir. I've become unable to feel death from just this. She closed the fan covering her mouth. Thus one dream closed. But the dream did not end. It simply changed to the next. There was no distinction between the ending of one dream and the beginning of another. Dozens of Levantians as well as Eugene's sanctuary were swallowed by a larger dream. Bang 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 bang. The terrifying blaze turned into the froth of a shaken champagne, scattering into nothingness. The cork of the champagne flew high, striking the ceiling and then falling down. Eugene's body swayed once. The world had changed suddenly and Eugene found himself standing on the ground. This was no longer the mansion that Sienna had dreamed of. It was not a forest with a gentle stream, where the air was fresh and the sky high and blue. It was an unknown, tranquil place. A place where carriages and wagons passed through, a place without warp gates. It was a rural village where the fields turned golden in the autumn. It was a small inn catering to travelers. Oh, it's you, she called out. Noir emerged from the open kitchen, turning around with 2 beers in hand. She gave a broad smile. Why aren't you at the counter? This was Anissa's dream. Even if our inn isn't doing well as the owner, you should be waiting for. Eugene didn't listen to the end. He charged forward and drove his fist into Noir's face. Pop. Noir's head burst like a tomato. No, it literally turned into a tomato. The pulp of the burst tomato fell to the floor with a splat. I told you, Hamel. Crushing the pulp underfoot, Noir brought one of the beers to her lips. It's going to be incredibly hard and tough. Ignition rekindled. Quick. A storm of flames obliterated the inn. Noir was swept up in the flames while sipping her beer. The violent flames turned into a tempest in a teacup. Eugene stepped back, startled. He suddenly found himself observing something entirely different. He saw a spinning roulette wheel. Across the table, Noir, eyeing a stack of chips, grinned broadly. Betting. Crack. Eugene stomped on the roulette and shattered it. Just as he was about to thrust Levantian into Noir's neck, the current dream folded and transformed into a new one. They were at a ball. In this dream there were others besides Noir and Eugene. Men and women in tuxedos and dresses held hands and spun around the dance floor. No, not other people. Every woman was Noir. The men were just faceless versions of Eugene. Isn't dancing nice too? Dozens of Noirs whispered to Eugene. It reminds me of Shimuan. I wanted to dance with you then. The real Noir, partnerless, tiptoed towards Eugene. But you sent me away and danced with Sienna Meridian. Up.dfrmfreewebble.com. She didn't unfold her fan. Instead she slowly removed her white glove. I wasn't bothered then. Now I'm angry, she said. Noir threw the removed glove at Eugene's face. Let's duel. It was a whisper full of laughter. But the thin glove, casually thrown, shattered Eugene's head. Chapter 556. Nightmare 4. Having lived through past and present lives, Eugene had experienced various incidents and sustained numerous injuries. Yet even he had never experienced his head being completely shattered. He had smashed countless demon heads, but this was the first time his head had burst. This was naturally the case, as a person typically died when their head was destroyed. It wasn't only true for humans either. Most creatures died if their heads were destroyed. However, Eugene did not die now. He was in a dream. This was not reality. But that was precisely why it felt even more bizarre and repulsive. Eugene watched as his skull fragments and brain bits scattered. He saw some liquid, possibly his blood or brain fluid, burst forth. His vision shook chaotically as his eyeballs sprung like springs and disrupted his sight. The pain of his head shattering, the swirling vision, all of it was a strange, repulsive, and novel experience for Eugene. Even though what was happening was not real, the sensations Eugene felt were as real as anything in the physical world. He knew that he would feel something similar if his head were to be destroyed in reality. Eventually his body staggered. Without his head, his torso lost control. His legs trembled and then he collapsed. Blood spurted from the messy stump of his neck like a fountain. Such a scene was familiar to Eugene. But he was only familiar with the scene from the perspective of the perpetrator. Eugene himself had never suffered such a fate. Even though he had attained divinity, he was fundamentally human. Losing his head would mean death. I am alive. He quickly assessed the situation. His head was shattered, but his thoughts continued. Complex and horrific pain threatened to obliterate his reason, but Eugene remained composed, enduring the agony. Don't get swept away. Don't think about death. He repeated these words to himself like a mantra. His head had indeed exploded, but he had not died. However, if he dwelled on death and became engulfed by it, he would fall straight into Noir Giabella's nightmare. Though his headless body sat there, spouting blood like a fountain from his stump, prominence did not vanish. Eugene's sanctuary still protected him in this ludicrous dream. Again, he thought. Fush. The scattered brain fluid returned. His brain reassembled and his skull rejoined. The rolling eyeballs returned to their sockets. Thus, Eugene's head was restored. He gasped while pressing his hands against the floor as he pushed against the ground to stand up. Ahaha. Laughter echoed from above. It was Noir's laughter. But her laugh was so loud it reverberated through the ballroom. You wanted to duel, didn't you? Eugene asked. He frowned and looked around. The dozens of dancing Noirs had vanished. Only Eugene stood in the spacious ballroom. And Noir was looking down at him from above. Eugene saw gigantic purple eyes as large as a full moon. All Eugene could see in the ballroom were Noir's eyes. I'm just kidding. It's a joke. Hamel, why would I want to duel with you? Noir giggled. Rumble. Her eyes seemed to recede, and then a gigantic hand descended towards Eugene. How about playing with dolls instead of a duel? Noir suggested. A massive finger attempted to grasp Eugene. Was it that Noir had grown or had everything else shrunk down? The question crossed Eugene's mind momentarily, but he decided it didn't matter either way. With a roar, the flames of Levantian lashed at Noir's fingers. The large finger dodged the flames. The movement was light and the motion minimal, but the flames missed their mark due to the space distorting and receding erratically. I'm going to be honest with you. I hate those flames, said Noir. Crackle. The space crumpled and compressed around Eugene. He was stopped in his tracks for a moment, and Noir's index finger curled while resting on her thumb. I don't want it to touch. The finger flicked and struck empty air. That space compressed around Eugene was ripped away along with him. Eugene swallowed the blood curdling in his throat. As long as all space was under Noir's control, using Prominence's spatial leap was impossible. The power of the sanctuary could only extend to protect Eugene in the dream. On the other hand, Noir was free to do anything. It was already impossible to kill her in reality, but in the realm of dreams, it wasn't an overstatement to call her omnipotent. But is Levantian's flame effective? Eugene wondered. Regardless of what Noir had just claimed, Eugene judged that Levantian was indeed effective against her. It was absurd to think otherwise. Levantian, the holy moonlight sword, was forged from the wishes of all gods existing from the last era to the present. It was a weapon designed to kill the Demon King of Incarceration and the Demon King of Destruction. Even if Noir Giabella had become an evil god, it was impossible for Levantian to be ineffective. The problem was, no matter how powerful Levantian was, it was meaningless if it couldn't hit its target. Such concerns had been unnecessary in his duel with Gavid. As Vermouth had said, Gavid was a traditional swordsman. Even with the demon eye of divine glory, Gavid's tactics had been straightforward. But Noir was different. In the first place, she had no need to choose a straightforward fight. Even now it was so. No matter how much Eugene swung Levantian, it couldn't reach her. Whoosh! Levantian began to multiply again. The crumpling and unfolding space was now filled with dozens of flaming blades. I was surprised earlier, but Noir scoffed from high above. The power itself may be duplicated, but the divinity cannot be. This is my dream after all. Crunch crackle. The ballroom was engulfed by flames and started to shake. The space itself began to crumple like a dollhouse made of paper. The windows, hidden behind red curtains, shattered. Noir's eyes were visible through the gaping window. Her purple eyes, emitting a sinister light, peered into the dollhouse. Well, even if there's no divinity, the power is considerable. But not enough to kill me. Even if the entire dream burns away and vanishes right now, she stated. Crush. The ballroom and the mansion disappeared. In that instant, prominence wrapped around Eugene. He hadn't caught the transition between the dream ending and a new one beginning before, but this time he did. He saw the dream that had unfolded vanish and a new one form. With a mighty crash, a massive wave engulfed Eugene. It was not a metaphorical wave but a real one, complete with the salty tang of the ocean breeze and the distant cries of seagulls. Eugene instinctively swung Levantian and sliced through the wave. I can leave the blazing dream behind and simply dream anew, Noir stated. As soon as the wave was cleaved, a tranquil sea emerged, stretching boundlessly with no land in sight. Noir lay on a sunbed atop a giant flamingo float under a large parasol. She lifted her oversized sunglasses, which covered half her face, and grinned. Teach most up-to-date novels are published on ebnovel.com. Since we're at the sea, why not relax a bit first? Noir proposed as she stood up. She held a bottle of oil she seemed to have conjured from nowhere and whispered, "How about we apply some oil to each other?" Huh. By this point, Eugene could hardly hide his exasperation. He gazed towards the endless ocean and murmured, "Just how far can you go?" "In a dream," Noir replied with a casual shrug and an easy smile. "Nothing is impossible. Everything is as you've imagined, Hamel. Here I am omnipotent." This leisure was not pretense. The current dream was far more expansive than any before. There were no distinct settings like cabins, forests, mansions, or ballrooms. This place was truly an infinite ocean. The more Eugene tried to perceive an end, the more the ocean seemed to expand. Such was the nature of this dream. The more he tried to penetrate it, the more it overwhelmed him. In this endlessly unfolding dream, Eugene's sanctuary seemed pitifully small. It's beyond anything I imagined, Eugene realized. He hadn't anticipated it would be this extreme. How could this be? The scale of it made it harder for Eugene to comprehend. Even if Noir had spent 300 years accumulating life force using every method and pursuing optimum efficiency, even if she had created Giabella Park in recent years and gathered tremendous amounts of life force and desire, this was incomprehensibly excessive. Eugene's shoulder twitched. Noir's left eye emitted a sinister light. It was the demon eye of divine glory, which she had directly received from Gavid. He reconsidered and observed the dream anew. Eventually Eugene came to an understanding. Noir had used the demon eye of divine glory to completely incarcerate the dream, cutting it off from the outside world and filling it with fantasies. In this dream there was no distinction from reality. Here, every fantasy Noir desired became a reality. "Do you understand now?" she asked. Noir squeezed a generous amount of oil into her left hand. "I know you don't want to admit it, but some things just aren't possible. In the dream world I was already near invincible 300 years ago. Now, do I even need to say?" The beach towel draped over her shoulders slid off. Her swaying tail moved behind her back and pulled at the strings of her bikini top. "Your struggles and resistance are enjoyable, but there's always time for that later. For now, let's enjoy something else. Let's apply oil to each other, lie down together and soak up the sun. Eugene briefly closed his eyes. Ah, don't misunderstand me, Hamel. I don't wish for a different ending with you. I am going to kill you and you must kill me. This is all part of our journey to the end, Noor said. Eugene contemplated with his eyes closed. So, why don't you enjoy yourself for a moment? You've been through so much. Hamel, endlessly reincarnated against your will, always having to live up to countless expectations. Oh, naturally, I know. I know that you would have done the same even without anyone expecting that much of you, she continued. How could he end this perfect world? Even if you hadn't known about Agaroth, given you or Hamel's reincarnation, you would have acted just as you have now. Even if you had not been born into the Lionheart family but into a humble, no, a more wretched family, you would have, somehow found your way to me, Noor confessed. This was a world incarcerated by the demon eye of divine glory, a dream constructed by the demon eye of fantasy. The fuel for this world's construction was all the power Noor had accumulated, along with the worship and faith garnered by fulfilling the desires of those in Giabella City through dreams. This dream was Noir's sanctuary. Even if Eugene possessed Agaroth's divinity and the light, standing his ground was the best he could manage. I know it sounds cruel, Hamel, but this is your final destination, Noir continued. Killing Noir in the dream was impossible. Levantian couldn't reach her. Even if he repeated the destruction of the dream, Noir would restart it again and again. You can't defeat me. Just as you prepared to kill me, I too prepared to kill you. You might think you came here to kill me without any leisure, but you were too late from the start. I could have killed you at any time, Hamel, Noir said. Destroying the dream was easy. But what was the point of repeatedly destroying something that could be restarted indefinitely? He knew. Using ignition repeatedly, proliferating Levantian and swinging it didn't tire him. The same was true for Noir. Then this battle would end only when someone's spirit broke first after being worn down by the endless repetition. Don't think about it too hard, Hamel. If we enjoy ourselves a bit before it ends, maybe we'll both have fewer regrets. Noor suggested temptingly. With a rustle, the strings of her swimsuit loosened. Holding the clear oil in her hands, Noor gave a smile. Eugene opened his eyes. His golden pupils were undisturbed and his lips were firmly shut. Seeing his expression, Noir frowned. Don't you like the sea? Noir asked. Eugene came to a conclusion. Escaping the dream and returning to reality alone was difficult. He could try hundreds or thousands of times. If the only way to reach Noir was to erode the dream, Eugene was willing to do so. But that was not the only method available to Eugene. Though he was in the dream, Sienna and the saints existed in the reality outside. Can my voice not reach? Eugene questioned himself. Yet he was undoubtedly connected to the saints. That was enough. Just as Eugene felt the connection with the saints, they too must be feeling his presence. This itself became a coordinate. No matter how many times Noir recreated the dream, Eugene could not be erased. As such, this coordinate was immovable. It's pointless, Noir scoffed while shaking her head. She too knew. Sienna Meridian, Christina Rogerus, and Anise Slywood were outside Giabella City. If they had entered, I would have killed them, Noir giggled. Her fingers were slippery with oil as she rubbed them together. Hamel, you break it from the inside. Sienna Meridian, Anise Slywood and Christina Rogerus break it from the outside. Fine, that sounds impressive, but only if it goes as planned. Do you really think it's possible? For a wizard resurrected from death, a ghost who clung hideously to this world in death, and a rotten doll made from the corpse of that ghost. Crackle, crackle. She began to rub her fingers faster and more forcefully. Do you think they can break my dream? Really, do you think they will be of help to you? Noir asked. Yeah, Eugene answered without hesitation. He didn't provide a reason. He believed there was no need to justify faith. His response was filled with conviction. Oh, is that so? Noir said flatly. She did not like his answer. The straps of her swimsuit, which had loosened, came back together. The oil disappeared from her fingers. That's annoying. Boom. The flamingo float carrying Noir exploded, and with it the ocean burst as well. Waves soared to the sky and crashed down all around Eugene. That faith of yours is annoying, Noir whispered beneath the shower of water droplets. She brushed back her wet hair with both hands while glaring at Eugene. I wanted to have a good dream with you, Hamel. Whoosh. Flames radiated out from Eugene, forming a circle around him. The split waves evaporated instantly. Through the dense fog, Noor pointed a finger at him. If you don't want a good dream. Crack. Dark power surged from her finger and pierced the fog. Eugene reflexively raised Levantian to block the attack, but he couldn't cut through or deflect Noir's magic. The force blasted him and Levantian backward. He was thrown back by the collision. Instead of pursuing him, Noir rotated the world by half. The sea that had been at their feet moved behind Eugene. I have no choice but to show you a nightmare. The voice that should have been distant sounded right next to him. Along with the voice, the bubbling of froth filled Eugene's ears. The bottomless sea swallowed Eugene. Chapter 557, Nightmare 5. Bonus image. 300 years ago, Noor Giabella demonstrated the devastating power of the demon eye of fantasy most accurately, not in battle but in a massacre. She had drowned 30,000 elite soldiers of the Tiraz kingdom on a plain devoid of water. The soldiers had lacked resistance to mental attacks. They had seen an ocean on the dry plain and floundered on the ground as if they were in deep water. In their desperate attempt to escape the non-existent sea, they shed their heavy armor and even cast aside their weapons. Yet, despite their efforts, all 30,000 soldiers perished by drowning on the dry plain within minutes. The situation Eugene found himself in now was even more dire than that event 3 centuries prior. This sea was an illusion, yet it was no illusion. It felt as real as any waking moment, and here Eugene could die repeatedly without truly dying. In the worst case, he would drown over and over again. Eugene's eyes widened in panic, and he bit his lip while instinctively holding his breath. He could last perhaps dozens of minutes without air, but not indefinitely. However, holding his breath for too long impaired his thinking, and inevitably his consciousness would start to fray. And he would lose consciousness regardless of his will. He tried to move, but his efforts were futile. The infinite ocean seemed to flow towards him, its immense pressure crushing him. Suddenly, a spiraled stream of water shot towards him like a drill amidst the violent currents. He realized it early on and made an attempt to avoid it. However, he failed to do so. It wasn't just the sea but the dream itself that restricted his actions. His body twisted violently as he was pierced through. Lungs, he thought. They had been pierced through. He no longer had any control over his breaths, and his consciousness rapidly faded. Water poured into his punctured lungs. It felt like his lungs were on fire, and his whole body felt as if it might burst. I can't endure this, Eugene realized. He came to a decision just as his consciousness started to slip away. He had considered holding his breath and waiting for an opportunity, but that seemed futile now. If he were truly in the ocean, there might have been other strategies to employ, but in this dream-made ocean, this was the best he could do. His body felt as if it might explode, and it actually did. The white flame formula ran amok, and the universe seemed to explode with it. All of Eugene's mana burst forth as flames. Noor stared with her jaws agape from above the sea. What Eugene had just done was essentially a form of self-destruction. Without seeking any alternative, he had simply blown himself up. Yet the power of his explosion was ludicrously immense, creating a gaping hole in the infinite sea. It was a force more potent than any techniques he utilized, including the empty sword and eclipse. It was bound to be, since he had sacrificed his entire existence to deliver the single blow. Hamel, this is quite surprising to say the least, Noor said, her initial anger and irritation now replaced by astonishment. She took a step back while blinking with wide eyes. You really are recklessly insane, she muttered. Crackle. Eugene burst forth from the hole in the sea. His eyes were bloodshot, his breathing agitated, and his hair drenched. Noor chuckled dryly and shook her head as the blazing form of Levantian soared towards her head. Hamel, she called out. Her voice changed, and so did her form. Noir, who had just been shaking her head, was now transformed into another being. Sienna blinked at Eugene. Then she spoke, You're trying to kill me. The flames did not scatter, and Levantian did not hesitate in its path. Eugene immediately beheaded Sienna. From nose to nape, her head split in two and flew away. Hamel, isn't this too much? Another voice sounded from behind him. He recognized it instantly. It was Anise. Eugene spun around with prominence. His adversary was clad in a stark white clerical robe. The skeletal form of Anise clacked her jaws and clasped her bony hands in prayer. Trying to kill me again when I am already dead. She muttered. Yeah, I'll kill you, Eugene responded curtly. Thud. Levantian split Anissa's skull from the crown to the chin. Crunch. Anissa's ribs were cracked open and Christina burst forth. She clung to Eugene's arm, tears of blood streaming down her face. Please, please, Sir Eugene, save me, she begged. To hell with that, Eugene spat out in annoyance as he pressed down harder with Levantian. Aakak. Christina's entire body was consumed by flames. The smell of burning flesh stung Eugene's nose, and in the fire Christina glowed brightly. Sir Eugene. Please save me. Below him Mare clung to Eugene's legs. Crack. Eugene wielded Levantian like a spear of flame and skewered Mare. Benefactor. It hurts. Rhaenyra was split into two the moment she appeared. Her two halves, one side to the right and the other to the left, transformed into different beings. Eugene, you're the one suited to become the head of the Lionheart family. I saved your life, you know. If it hadn't been for me. Cyan and Seal approached Eugene, babbling as if they were genuinely making conversation. Tired of the recurring farce, Eugene bit his lip. Rumble. Flames enveloped Levantian and gathered into a massive form like a hammer. He then manifested the skill associated with the Annihilation Hammer. Pressure. To smash. To burst. To explode. This simple, brutish power struck at Seal and Cyan. No, it didn't make contact. The strike stopped just in front of them. Or. The power contained in the strike was redirected to the surroundings. Hamel. Are you intending to kill the Descendant of Vermouth with your own hands? He saw a chilling glare. The man's bushy beard quivered. Molin's axe pushed back the fiery hammer. The dream had changed suddenly. Just moments before it had been the sea. No, was it really the sea? When Cyan and Seal appeared, it had been the Lionheart mansion, and now he was in a blizzard in Lahanjar. Shit. Eugene grimaced as he uttered the word. This kind of dream was familiar to him. It was a classic nightmare that Noir used to favor 300 years ago. By repeatedly showing nightmares about his comrades, she made it impossible to distinguish between reality and the nightmare. Hence she would bring malice from the nightmare into reality and sow discord. Naturally, it had no effect on Hamel and his companions. Even now it was the same. No matter how intricate Noir's nightmares were, Eugene's emotions remained unconquered, dominated not by fear but by irritation and anger. What good is this crap to me? Eugene roared, splitting Molin neatly in two along with his axe. I didn't go mad from such nightmares even 300 years ago. Do you think I would now? He stepped over Molin's bloody corpse and strode across the blood-stained snowscape. The dream ended and a new one began. Of course you won't go mad, Noir's voice echoed. I don't believe this dream will drive you mad either. Nor do I wish it to. Then what are you trying to do? Eugene asked through gritted teeth. But even if it doesn't drive you mad, you hate these kinds of dreams, don't you? Said Noir. He especially hated this one. A dream you hate is a nightmare after all, she said. The light flickered. Shadows began to spread in the darkening world. He was on a ravaged battlefield. Eugene knew this place. It was Babel, the castle of the demon king of incarceration from 300 years ago. O almighty God of light, please protect this foolish lamb after his rest, on his perilous journey. With mercy and love guide him and on the path the lamb takes. Anise stuttered through her prayer before finally breaking into sobs. Bang bang. Molin, whom Eugene had just killed, reappeared. He slammed his head and fists into the ground. No. Don't go, don't leave me behind. Sienna sobbed, rubbing her cheek against the face of the corpse. Beside her knelt Vermouth. His head was bowed and his expression was hidden, but the slight trembling of his shoulders was visible. Hamel's vision had been too blurry to see his surroundings clearly when he died, but it seemed Vermouth had shed tears as well. Eugene closed his mouth and stood silently. Meanwhile the dream continued. Sienna screamed. She grabbed Anise by the collar and demanded to know about heaven. When she didn't receive the answer she wanted, Sienna threw herself on the ground, screaming. Anise too covered her mouth, fumbling with her rosary as she wept. It's not over yet, Vermouth said. He staggered to his feet. It was the first time Eugene had seen his expression so distorted, and his cheeks streaked with tears. This dream was distinct from the dreams he had seen until now. It was heavy and somber. If the previous dreams had been mere fabrications, impossible in reality, the current dream was different. For Eugene, this dream was closest to a nightmare. There's no fabrication in this one, Noir whispered, standing beside Hamel's corpse. 300 years ago I was different. I did not confront you directly. In the first place, only the vassals of incarceration were stationed in Babel at that time. Noir chuckled softly while taking a seat beside Hamel's body. But after the battle ended and the oath was established, I pleaded with the demon king of incarceration to grant me the memories of this place. I wanted to see my beloved. I wanted to my Hamel's end by any means necessary. Eugene didn't interrupt Noir's explanation. And of course I cried as well. Just like Sienna Meridian, Anise Slywood, Moulin Roar and Vermouth Lionheart. I cried because I was sad and felt regretful of my Hamel's death. Noir was no longer clad in a swimsuit. She now wore a pitch-black dress, her face veiled in black. I truly wept. More bitterly than any of your comrades. I gave up eating and drinking. No one could come near me. I secluded myself in my room until the moment the Devildom became Helmuth. While all demons celebrated the victory of incarceration, I alone mourned you, Noir said softly. She lifted her head to look at Eugene. Even though we've met again in this reincarnation, the sorrow I felt then was real, Hamel. Can you understand that? Can you comprehend the grief of those left behind by your reckless death? Did you ever consider the sorrow that those who remained would have to bear when you died? Noir asked, sounding mournful. Eugene silently observed Noir. He saw the corpse of the stupid Hamel, dead like a fool, and beside it Sienna kneeling, Anise sobbing, Moulin banging his head and Vermouth standing motionless. No, Eugene uttered a single word. He shook his head. I cannot understand. He gripped Levantian firmly. I did not think of it, he admitted. This nightmare deeply stirred Eugene's emotions. But so what? He asked. The dream trembled. The left behind. Emotions? What do they matter to me? He ridiculed. Eugene strode forward. Whoosh. The flames that spread out burned Moulin and Anise. At that time I was dying. I didn't want to die, but it was inevitable, a situation where I had to die. Do you think I had time to think of others? He questioned. He took another step. The flames consumed Vermouth and Sienna. Your feelings? What should I care, Noir Giabella? Why should I understand your emotions? What does it matter to me that you grieved? He spat. He took another step, but the flames did not advance further. They defied Eugene's will. Neither Hamel's corpse nor Noir was engulfed by the flames. Hamel. Noir chuckled as she caressed Hamel's corpse. You say such horrible things. Do you really need to say that when I wept over your death? Noir rose from the flames. The cold corpse of Hamel rose with Noir's touch, a hole in his chest. Noir cradled Hamel's body and spun around in the flames. Well, I also liked that horrible aspect of you. Did you know? Hamel, even now I'm growing fonder of you. My love deepens. Why do you think that is? She asked. It's because, Eugene said, his lips twitching slightly, I think more and more about wanting to kill you. That's right. Noir nodded with a bright smile. But it's not just that either. You see, I find joy in heading towards our inevitable end together. With each repetition of these dreams, you grow more endearing to me. You, Eugene said. He lifted Levantian high. Crackle. Ignition and prominence flared together and Levantian began to multiply. Dozens of flames swirled around Eugene. Are contradicting yourself, he finished. The flames created a massive flow, a unified current that gradually spread out while shattering the dream of Babel. You said you would show me nightmares, yet you don't show the real nightmares, Eugene called out. Read latest chapters at fiwabnov.co only. Noir stared at him wordlessly. The nightmares I truly don't want to see, you don't show those, Eugene continued. Babel burned down completely, vanishing in flames. Normally, at this moment the next dream should have begun. But this time it didn't. The dream did not start anew and only flames remained. In a world still burning, Eugene and Noir faced each other. Is it because you feel the same way? Eugene challenged. Noir still held Hamel's corpse. She caressed the cold, stiff body, then quietly pushed it towards the flames. Whoosh. Hamel's body turned to ash in an instant. What do you mean? She asked. Her face remained veiled, revealing only Noir's lips to Eugene. It was the smile he had seen countless times. Repetitive, mechanical curves. That wasteland, Eugene said, glaring at Noir. The last of Agaroth and Arya. Noir had shown Eugene many dreams. Nightmares too. But she had never shown him the most overt and deeply penetrating dream. That wasteland was the true nightmare for both Eugene and Noir. It was the last they had already endured once together. Noir kept smiling, but Eugene could not detect even a hint of mirth in her constrained smile. "Hamel," she said after a brief silence. She slowly shook her head as she continued, "That statement. Do you also consider that wasteland a nightmare?" "It's not a pleasant dream," he responded. Noir smiled quietly. The repetitive, mechanical curve of her smile transformed. "That's right," she admitted. The emptied world was suddenly bathed in a crimson sunset. The vast wasteland lay scattered with countless bodies. Noir, with the red twilight at her back, transformed. "It cannot be pleasant," she said. "The war god's saint, the Twilight Witch." Arya turned towards Eugene with a wistful smile. Chapter 558. Nightmare 6. Bonus image. Rhaenyra was in her original form as the Black Dragon, and Sienna stood on her head. She had her eyes closed and raised Mary with both her hands. An hour had passed since Eugene entered Giabella City alone. Since then, Sienna had been deep in concentration with her eyes closed. She had not spoken a word since then. Though she remained still, it wasn't without effect. Positioned above Rhaenyra, Sienna became the focal point through which all the mana in the vicinity, to be exact from outside Giabella City, seemed to flow. The saint was on her knees by Sienna's side. Christina silently prayed, feeling Eugene's divine power, while Anis used this to determine Eugene's condition and location from within Christina. This was not planned, yet the three acted as if following Eugene's unspoken desires. The saints had been able to clearly sense Eugene's presence before he entered Giabella City. Regardless of where he was in the world, they could communicate with him through the resonance of divine power. But now that was no longer possible. It was as if they were peering through a dense fog. Eugene was undoubtedly somewhere within the murky environment, but his exact location and condition remained elusive. While it was important to locate his physical whereabouts, likely near the city walls or somewhere within the city, the state of Eugene's mind, which had been dragged into a dream, was more of immediate concern. Despite their prayers, they felt no revelation from Eugene, nor could they sense any divine sign. "It has not extinguished," Anis declared. Christina nodded while continuing to pray with her eyes closed. She wasn't looking towards Giabella City or its walls. She was gazing at a faintly flickering light. The flames belonged to Eugene, to Levantian. Even amidst the deep fog and the depths of a dark nightmare, that flame continued to burn. Its light signified that Eugene was not dead. He was still alive. Several times both Christina and Anis experienced sharp pain. A deep, throbbing ache radiated from within. A burning heat that seemed to consume them came from their very being, and the stigmata on their hands burned with a sharp pain. It didn't stop with pain either. The scars of the stigmata split open and started to bleed. They could endure this pain. Anis was accustomed to even greater suffering from past battles, and Christina, though not familiar with such pain, bore it, believing it was all for Eugene's sake. They knew why they were experiencing this pain. It was because of Levantian. Though Eugene had not yet escaped the nightmare, even the battles within the nightmare affected Levantian. Their faith in Eugene and Levantian was keeping a grip on Eugene and keeping him from being completely swallowed by the nightmare and being dominated by Noir. After a long silence and focused meditation, Sienna finally made a sound. Her eyes cracked open and her brows furrowed. "It was wise not to enter," she said. The power enveloping the entire city was that of the demon eye of divine glory, enhanced by the dark power and life force Noir had accumulated over her lifetime. No matter how prepared Sienna might have been, entering that place would have immediately drawn her into Noir's dream. "Have you found a way?" Christina asked, lifting her gaze to focus on Sienna as she hid her blood-soaked hands. But there was no hiding it. The smell of blood in the sleeves and the clerical robe stained red by the bleeding stigmata gave it away. Sienna felt a melancholic surge as she considered how diligently Anis had hidden the stigmata 300 years ago. "If it is just a way, I have known one from the start," Sienna answered. "Really?" Christina questioned. "Why are you surprised? Though not as effective in dreams, in reality I am a true goddess of magic. Did you think I would truly have no way out?" Sienna questioned. "Oh." Christina did not voice that answer aloud. Anise shared the same opinion but did not assert it through Christina's lips. It couldn't be helped. Sienna had returned after a year and boasted of her divine status, yet she had never shown the majestic demeanor befitting a goddess of magic. Leaping great distances was magically impressive, but even Seal could do as much with her demon eye of darkness. And for all her posturing, Sienna had been unable to resist the spell contained in Noir's invitation. She had been dragged into a dream, a fact that the saints found somewhat skeptical. As expected, Lady Sienna. Please tell us the method you possess, asked Christina. Do you know how to wake up from a dream? Sienna questioned. What? Christina asked. You have to wake up, Sienna said seriously, and Christina mirrored her solemn expression. Anise refrained from reacting hastily, instead waiting for Sienna's next words. Do you know how to wake up? Sienna asked once more. Both Christina and Anise just stared silently at Sienna, slightly confused. You make them wake up. Shake them, splash water, or hit them, Sienna answered her own question. Is that what you call a method? Christina questioned with an incredulous expression. This idiot, to think that is even an answer. Anise shouted in exasperation. Christina could no longer maintain a serious expression at such a shallow and simplistic response. Anise also lost her temper. Why are you getting angry? Sienna asked. It's incomprehensible that you, Lady Sienna, would even ask such a question. Christina argued. To wake up from a dream, one must wake up from their sleep. To wake up from sleep, one must be awakened. Was there anyone in the world who was oblivious to this glaringly obvious fact? Trying to keep her calm, Christina pointed out, we cannot enter the city. It's impossible for us to shake Sir Eugene awake. So what then? There's no need to wake Eugene directly, said Sienna with a smirk. She raised Mary. We'll wake the entire city. You don't mean to drop a meteor, do you? Christina asked aghast. Sienna did not answer but gave a smile instead. The petals of Mary trembled. Sienna became a hub for mana, influenced by the magic emanating from Mary. Whoosh! The visible flow of mana transformed into hundreds, thousands of petals. Suddenly, Rhaimyra's surroundings were filled with petals. Here. Sienna extended her hand to Christina while standing amid the drifting petals. Christina did not know why Sienna was doing so, but she did not ask. There was no trace of playfulness in Sienna's eyes. Christina swallowed nervously and cautiously reached out her hand. Her hand, cracked with stigmata and soaked in blood, moved towards Sienna's. It's okay, Sienna assured. Christina and Anise hesitated. Naturally, reaching out a blood-soaked hand to another was disconcerting. However, Sienna, unbothered, firmly grasped Christina's hand. The blood from the stigmata touched Sienna's hand first. The mana that Sienna commanded enveloped the saints. And it became magic. They felt a massive tremor. The saints jumped up, startled. Giabella City looked completely different from a moment ago. The entirety of the massive city was entwined in complex vines. What is that? Christina asked. It's magic, Sienna replied. The sage Fisher Laviola had said that human magic was inferior. It was no different now than in the age of myth. Humans could not find answers in mana. They can find the profound and infinite potential of magic and mana into trivial designs called spells. A year ago, Sienna was unable to bypass these limitations. She had attempted to surpass her limits, but it had been difficult and elusive. But now it was different. Sienna Meridian had transcended humans and their magic. Thus she no longer needed spells. Her magic had reached the realm of miracles. Sienna did not wish for miracles to descend. Rather, her very desires became miracles. Even so, it's impossible to destroy that dream, Sienna admitted. Morgiabella's dream could not be shattered even by divine magic. But it could be shaken. Even if dozens of archwizards combined their forces to unleash a calamitous spell, the dream would not waver, but Sienna's magic could shake it. There it is, Sienna whispered. Mindlessly shaking the dream would hardly wake Eugene from his deep, ongoing nightmare. Sienna could scarcely feel Eugene's presence in that city. But now it was different. Just as the saints saw the magic that only Sienna could see, now Sienna also perceived the light that only the saints could see. The connection formed by their clasped hands allowed Sienna to see the light of Eugene and Levantine. She saw the chains formed by the demon eye of divine glory and the incomprehensible, unobservable illusion it formed. But within it she found Eugene's spirit. She broadened her view to locate Eugene's body. He had been dragged straight into a dream after passing the city gate, so she thought he might be lying just inside it in front of the gate, but he wasn't. Eugene was wandering the city like a sleepwalker. However, he wasn't wandering aimlessly. The entire city was guiding him. It had been just over an hour since Eugene had entered the city, and he was already nearing its center. Sienna bit her lip hard and gripped Mary tightly. The swirling petals turned the color of blood, reflecting Sienna's killing intent. In the heart of Giabella City, where day and night once held no distinction, the casino that used to burst with tourists now lay steeped in silence. The brilliant lights had all been extinguished, leaving the building beneath a dim glow. Two of the famed Giabella faces, which used to enchant tourists with dreams, sat decoratively placed. Higher up, in a pitch-black sky devoid of clouds, a single Giabella face was flying. Sienna looked up at it while biting her lip. She saw a woman reclining on a lavish chair. It was Noir Giabella, her eyes closed as if she were asleep. However, Sienna felt the intensity of a gaze piercing even through those closed eyelids. She steadied her trembling breath. At that moment, Noir's long eyelashes fluttered. Her eyelids slowly lifted, revealing amethyst eyes. They were as beautiful as the gemstone, but Sienna felt no sense of beauty from them. Instead, she sensed a chilling eeriness and revulsion from those eyes. Though they were far apart, Sienna distinctly felt Noir's gaze. She saw Noir's red lips twitch and curve upwards. The distance between them was meaningless. Being seen meant being caught in the grip of the demon eye of fantasy. Quiver. The petals surrounding Sienna thrashed violently. The outer petals darkened suddenly, turning to ash and scattering. Having been humiliated through the invitation, Sienna had prepared magic to withstand the demon eye of fantasy and from being forced to sleep. She had readied herself for the worst. Thus she was able to defend herself. It's less potent than expected, Sienna concluded. Though much stronger than the power contained in the invitation, she could manage with her defensive magic. It wasn't hard to speculate why Noir's power was reduced. Even that monstrous whore was likely expending much of her energy to maintain the dream that held Eugene. This created an opportunity for Sienna to strike. Sienna prepared her next magic, calling upon the saint's prayers to summon Eugene. Eugene wasn't merely wandering lost in a dream. He would be doing his best to shatter it from within. Thus, Sienna needed to shake the dream, the city, from the outside and continue to press Noir Giabella. Press. Sienna thought mockingly. She glanced at her arm. It was covered in goosebumps and she felt a chill down her spine. The hand that had touched Denise and Christina's blood had long since gone cold. Sienna glared at Noir while slowly regulating her breaths. Sienna was the one feeling pressed by Noir. Noir did not rise from her chair. She wasn't coming after Sienna using the Giabella face either. She remained above the city's center, the casino. Her gaze was filled with malice and murderous intent, and her lips twisted into a smirk of annoyance and anger. The petals, formed from the manipulation of mana, continued to smolder in response to the demon eye of fantasy. Anise, Christina. Sienna shook off the pressure, whispering quietly, "Pray that your god may awaken." Despite their linked senses, Sienna was not Eugene's saint. No matter how fervently she prayed or called, her voice would never reach him. But the prayers of the saints could reach Eugene. Even if too soft and faint at first, if they kept shaking the dream, the saints' voices would reach him more clearly. "Stop napping and just wake up already." Eugene stood motionless while surveying his surroundings. This wasteland remained vividly in his memory as one of the most intense experiences in Agarotha's recollections. Time and again, Eugene had conjured up images of this wasteland and had even vicariously experienced it several times. Yet no matter how often he revisited this place, his emotions never changed. But unlike the faint impressions and experiences of the past, this dream felt no different from reality. He saw the faces of the corpses. All were faces that existed in Agarotha's memories. If he delved deeper, he could even recall their names. Eugene saw the terror and despair that remained etched on the faces of the dead. The deaths had occurred so abruptly that they seemed devoid of pain, but this fact scratched at Eugene's heart all the more. Agarotha's divine army had perished at the hands of the demon king of destruction. Agaroth was the one who had commanded the divine army to die in such a manner. The circumstances had been such that he was left with no other choice. Eugene might have devised another strategy, but Agaroth had been a man who would issue such orders. In this dream, Hamel, you and I will share the same feelings. Noor spoke, her form and voice altered. She was no longer the queen of night demons nor Giabella. Now she took on the form and voice of the god of war's saint, the twilight witch Arya. I cannot feel joy, she said. Noor Giabella's hair was as dark as night. Arya's hair was as red as sunset. Even if I died in your arms at the end, that death was not what Arya desired, she continued. Noor Giabella's eyes resembled amethysts. Arya's eyes were like rubies. This place is a nightmare for both of us, she said. Arya took a step closer. But Arya began, even in this nightmare, if I am with you I could love. Eugene saw Arya's neck. It was the neck that Agaroth had broken. Now unbroken, it was adorned with a necklace. It was a necklace strung with a ring engraved with the words Noor Giabella. The ring engraved with the name Hamildina's was currently on the ring finger of Arya's left hand. Eugene recalled the conversation they had shared with Noir while fitting those rings. At that time, Noir had said that when she would eventually kill Hamel by her own hand, she would place the ring bearing her name on the finger of a dying Hamel as he died embraced in despair. Eugene finally spoke softly. After the war in Horia, Noir had realized Arya's memories. He had shared a conversation with her. But nothing had changed. They each wished for the other's death. But now the words Noor spoke and her actions to this point. I cannot, Eugene said quietly. Never.